The stars had always seemed peaceful to Park. He had spent 20 years watching them from orbit, first as a young pilot, then as a captain, and now as the commander of Horizon's Edge, Earth's largest orbital defense station. But tonight the stars were not peaceful. Tonight they were full of enemies. Stood at the observation window, his hands clasped behind his back. His reflection stared back at him, a man of 45 with gray streaks in his black hair and tired lines around his eyes. Behind him, the control room buzzed with activity. Officers shouted coordinates. Screens flashed with warning signals. The air smelled of coffee and fear. "Commander," said a voice behind him, "they're here." Did not turn around. He already knew. He could see them, 400 warships emerging from the darkness like metal ghosts. The Dominion had arrived. There were not one species but 7, bound together under a single empire that had ruled this part of the galaxy for 10,000 years. They were ancient when humans still lived in caves. They were powerful when humans first discovered fire. And now, they had come to end humanity's brief experiment with the stars. "How long until they reach weapon range?" asked. 6 hours, sir." 6 hours. That was all the time Earth had left before the shooting started. Finally turned from the window and walked to the central command table. A holographic map floated above it, showing Earth surrounded by red dots, enemy ships forming a perfect sphere around the planet. "They're not attacking," observed Doctor, the station's chief engineer. She stood across from, her dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Her white coat was stained with grease from whatever machine she had been repairing. "They could destroy us right now, but they're waiting." "They want us to surrender," said. "They always offer a choice before destruction. It makes them feel civilized." As if hearing his words, the main screen flickered. A face appeared, not human but close enough to be unsettling. The ambassador had pale blue skin, 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern, and a mouth that seemed too wide for its face. When it spoke, its voice was smooth and cold. "People of Earth," the ambassador said, "the Dominion offers you mercy. Surrender your world, your ships, and your freedom. In return, you will be allowed to live as servants of the Dominion. You have 7 days to accept. If you refuse, your planet will burn, your species will end, and your name will be forgotten. Choose wisely." The screen went dark. For a long moment, no one in the control room spoke, could hear his own heartbeat. He could feel the weight of billions of lives pressing down on his shoulders. Somewhere below, on the surface of Earth, people were watching this same message. Mothers were holding their children. Soldiers were checking their weapons. Leaders were arguing about what to do. "Sir," someone said, "we're receiving transmissions from Earth Command. Multiple governments are calling for emergency meetings. There are reports of riots in several major cities." Nodded slowly. He had expected this. Humanity had never faced a threat like the. For 200 years they had explored the stars, built colonies, and believed they were becoming a great civilization. But compared to the Dominion, they were children playing with toys. "Get me Admiral," ordered. The screen flickered again, and an old man's face appeared. Admiral was 80 years old, with a face like cracked leather and eyes that had seen too many battles. He had commanded Earth's fleet for 30 years, and he had never lost a war. But he had also never faced an enemy this powerful. The Admiral said, "I assume you've seen the message." "Yes, sir. What are our orders?" The Admiral was silent for a moment. Behind him, could see the bridge of the flagship Unbroken Will, officers moving quickly, screens showing tactical data, the controlled chaos of a military preparing for the impossible. "Our orders," Admiral said slowly, "are to survive, but I don't intend to just survive, I intend to fight." "Sir, their fleet outnumbers us 10 to 1. Their ships are more advanced. Their weapons can." "I know what their weapons can do," the Admiral interrupted. "I watched them destroy the colony on Mars during the First Contact War. I saw them burn 3 million people in less than an hour. I remember." Remembered too. His brother had been on Mars. He had been 17 years old, a student at the Terraforming Academy. He had wanted to be an engineer, to build new worlds for humanity to live on. Instead, he had become ash floating in the thin Martian atmosphere. "Then you know we can't win a direct fight," said. "No," Admiral agreed. "We can't win a direct fight, so we won't fight directly. Doctor, I understand you've been studying the data from the First Contact War." Stepped forward, surprised to be addressed. "Yes, Admiral. I've been analyzing the communication patterns and ship movements. I found something strange." "Explain." Pulled up a holographic display showing complex waveforms and data streams. "The ships don't operate independently. They're connected through a quantum network, a kind of shared mind that coordinates all their actions. It's why they move so perfectly, why their tactics are so precise. But it's also a weakness. If we could disrupt that network, even for a few minutes, their fleet would fall into chaos." Admiral leaned forward. "Can it be done?" "I don't know yet. I need more time to study the data, and I need help." "You'll have both. I'm sending you everything we have on technology, every scrap of data from every encounter, and I'm assigning you a team of the best scientists on Earth." The Admiral paused. "We have 7 days, Doctor. Find me a way to hurt them." The transmission ended. Looked at, seeing the fear in her eyes, but also something else. Determination. Hope. The stubborn human refusal to accept defeat. "Can you really do it?" he asked quietly. Shook her head. "I don't know, but I'm going to try." Outside the observation window, the fleet hung in the darkness like a promise of death. 400 ships, each one capable of destroying cities. 400 ships, crewed by species that had conquered 1,000 worlds. 400 ships, waiting for humanity to kneel. But had no intention of kneeling. His brother had not kneeled on Mars. The 3 million dead had not kneeled, and he would not kneel now. On Earth, Admiral made a broadcast that was heard across the planet and beyond, transmitted to every human colony and every alien civilization watching. His voice was old but strong, carrying the weight of humanity's defiance. "To the Dominion and to all who watch, we have received your ultimatum. We understand your power. We know what you have done to others, but we are not others. We are humanity. We do not kneel. We do not break. We do not surrender. If we must fall, we will fall standing. And we will make you remember our name." Across Earth, people stopped what they were doing. Rioters lowered their signs. Soldiers stood. Children looked up at their parents. And in that moment, something changed. Fear did not disappear. It could not disappear, but it was joined by something stronger. Pride, anger, the ancient human instinct that said, "We will not go quietly into the darkness." The siege had begun, and humanity was not ready. But humanity had never been ready for any of the challenges it had faced, and it had faced them anyway. Turned from the window and began giving orders. There was work to do. 7 days was not much time, but it would have to be enough. 3 days had passed since the ultimatum. 3 days of fear, preparation, and desperate hope. On Earth, the skies had changed. At night, people could look up and see the enemy ships, tiny points of light that did not move like stars, that hung in place like watching eyes. Children asked their parents what those lights were. Parents lied and said they were satellites. In the underground bunker beneath Seoul, Lieutenant was not looking at the sky. She was looking at a machine. The fighter stood in the center of the hangar, gleaming under bright lights. It was smaller than a normal combat ship, painted in dark colors that seemed to swallow light rather than reflect it. Its wings were sharp and angular, designed not for beauty but for invisibility. This was the Storm Hawk, humanity's most advanced stealth fighter, and it was the only one of its kind. "She's beautiful," said softly. "She's untested," replied the technician beside her, an older man with oil-stained hands. "We finished building her 2 weeks ago. She's never been in real combat." "Then I'll test her." Was 28 years old, young for a lieutenant but old for a pilot. Most pilots her age had already died or retired. Combat in space was brutal and unforgiving. One mistake, one moment of hesitation, and you became a cloud of frozen debris drifting between worlds, but had survived 12 engagements against pirates and 3 encounters with scout ships. She was the best pilot Earth had, and everyone knew it. That was why Admiral had chosen her. The door behind her opened and a voice called out, "Lieutenant, you're needed in the briefing room." Took one last look at the Storm Hawk, then followed the messenger through the winding corridors of the bunker. The halls were crowded with soldiers, scientists, and civilians, all the people who had been deemed important enough to protect. She passed families huddled together, children sleeping on thin mattresses, old people staring at nothing with empty eyes. The weight of their fear pressed against her like a physical thing. The briefing room was small and cramped. A holographic table dominated the center, surrounded by chairs occupied by officers and scientists. At the head of the table stood Admiral, looking even older than he had 3 days ago. Beside him was Captain Park, who had come down from Horizon's Edge for this meeting. And next to was Doctor, who looked like she had not slept in days. "Lieutenant," Admiral said, "thank you for joining us. Please sit." Sat. She noticed that everyone in the room was looking at her with a strange intensity, as if she was both their greatest hope and their deepest fear. "I assume you've been briefed on the Storm Hawk," the Admiral continued. "Yes, sir. Experimental stealth fighter capable of avoiding detection systems. Range of 2 million kilometers. Armament is minimal, 2 plasma torpedoes and a point defense laser." "Correct, and do you understand why we built it?" Hesitated. "I assumed it was for reconnaissance, getting close to enemy ships without being seen." Admiral shook his head. He gestured to Doctor, who stepped forward and activated the holographic display. A complex diagram appeared, waveforms, data streams, and a web of glowing lines connecting hundreds of points. "This is the quantum network," explained. Her voice was hoarse from lack of sleep, but her eyes were sharp. "Every ship in their fleet is connected to every other ship through this network. It allows them to coordinate perfectly, to share information instantly, to fight as a single organism rather than as individual units. It's what makes them unbeatable," added. "In the first contact war, we tried to fight them with traditional tactics. Every time we attacked, they already knew where we were going. Every time we retreated, they cut off our escape. It was like fighting someone who could read our minds." Nodded. "But the network has a flaw. It requires a central hub to function, a command ship that processes all the data and sends it back out to the fleet. Destroy the hub or even disrupt it for a few minutes and the network collapses. The ships become isolated, confused, vulnerable." "Understood now. You want me to fly the Storm Hawk to the command ship and attack it?" "Not attack," said. "Plant a device, a quantum disruptor. It won't destroy the ship, but it will overload the network hub and break their coordination for approximately 10 minutes. 10 minutes, Admiral said heavily, is all we need. In 10 minutes our fleet will strike with everything we have. We will hit them before they can reorganize. We will destroy as many ships as possible, and we will show them that humanity is not helpless." Looked at the holographic display, calculating distances and trajectories in her head. The command ship was at the center of the formation, surrounded by layers of defensive vessels. Even with the Storm Hawk stealth systems, getting there would be almost impossible. "What are my odds of survival?" she asked. The room went silent. Admiral met her eyes without flinching. "Approximately 12%. 12%. Less than 1 in 8. Thought about her mother who was somewhere in this bunker. She thought about her squadron who were counting on her to lead them. She thought about the children sleeping in the hallways who would grow up as slaves if she failed." "When do I leave?" she asked. Admiral almost smiled. "In 48 hours. Use the time to rest and prepare. And Lieutenant," he paused, his voice softening just slightly, "thank you." The meeting ended. People filed out, talking in low voices about logistics and timing, stayed behind, studying the holographic display, memorizing the position of every enemy ship. She was so focused that she did not notice approaching until he spoke. "You're brave," he said. "I'm not brave, I'm just too stubborn to say no." Laughed a short, bitter sound. "That's the same thing. My brother was the same way. He could have evacuated from Mars before the attack. Instead, he stayed to help others escape. He saved 200 people before the fires took him." Looked at the captain, seeing the old pain in his eyes. "I didn't know." "Most people don't. I don't talk about it much." Paused. "The point is, some people run from danger and some people run toward it. The ones who run toward it usually die, but sometimes they save everyone else. I think you're one of those people, Lieutenant." He turned and walked away, leaving alone with her thoughts. 48 hours. In 48 hours, she would fly into the heart of an enemy fleet with a 12% chance of survival. She would carry a small device that might save humanity or might achieve nothing at all. She would trust her life to a machine that had never been tested in combat. But she would not be alone. Across Earth and across the solar system, other people were preparing for their own impossible missions. Ground forces were drilling for the invasion everyone knew was coming. Scientists were working day and night to find other weaknesses. Diplomats were sending secret messages to other species, hoping to find allies in the darkness. Somewhere above, General was positioning his troops in the mountains of Korea, preparing to fight an enemy that had technology centuries ahead of his own. He did not complain. He did not despair. He simply worked, like a farmer preparing for a storm that could not be stopped but could perhaps be survived. This was humanity's way. When faced with the impossible, they did not give up. They worked harder. They thought faster. They refused to accept that the story was over. Outside the bunker, night had fallen. The ships glowed in the sky like cold stars. In 4 more days, they would begin their attack. In 4 more days, the killing would start. But first there would be thunder. First there would be a storm. And Lieutenant would be the one to bring it. The 5th day began in silence. Sat in the cockpit of the Storm Hawk, her hands resting on controls she had memorized over the past 2 days. The stealth fighter hung in the shadow of Jupiter's moon Europa, hidden from sensors by the moon's mass and the ship's own invisibility systems. Through her viewport, she could see nothing but darkness and distant stars. But she knew what was out there, 400 enemy ships waiting to destroy her world. "Storm Hawk, this is Horizon's Edge," Captain's voice crackled through her earpiece. "Operation Tempest begins in 10 minutes. All units confirm ready status." "Storm Hawk confirms ready," replied. Her voice was steady, but her heart was pounding. Across the solar system, other voices responded. Ships hidden behind Saturn's rings. Squadrons waiting in the asteroid belt. The remains of Earth's fleet, scattered and concealed, all waiting for the signal to attack. In the command center of Horizon's Edge, watched the countdown timer with cold focus. Beside him, Doctor was making final adjustments to the quantum disruptor signal. Admiral stood at the main viewport, his old eyes fixed on the distant light of Earth. "This will either save us or doom us," the Admiral said quietly. "Then we'd better make sure it saves us," replied. The timer reached 0. "All units," Admiral's voice boomed across every frequency, "attack." Space came alive with fire. From behind every moon and asteroid, human ships emerged like ghosts becoming solid. Fighters screamed across the void, their engines burning bright. Cruisers opened fire with plasma cannons, sending streams of blue-white death toward the formation. For the first time in days, humanity was not waiting. Humanity was striking. They responded instantly. Their network allowed them to coordinate their defense in microseconds. Fighters launched to intercept. Shields flared as they absorbed incoming fire. Return volleys tore through 3 human cruisers, turning them into expanding clouds of debris and frozen bodies. But the attack was a distraction. The real mission was. She pushed the Storm Hawk's engines to full power, racing through the chaos of battle like a shadow through sunlight. Her stealth systems bent sensor waves around her ship, making her invisible to everything except direct visual observation. Explosions bloomed around her, some from human ships dying, some from vessels wounded. But she did not look. She could not afford to look. The command ship grew larger in her viewport. It was massive, 10 times the size of any human vessel, covered in weapons and sensor arrays. At its heart was the network hub that connected the entire fleet. Destroy that hub, and 400 ships would become 400 confused individuals. "Storm Hawk, you're approaching the outer defense perimeter," his voice said in her ear. "Maintain current speed. They haven't detected you yet." Yet muttered, "That's a comforting word." She slipped between two destroyers, close enough to see the alien symbols painted on their hulls. Her hands were sweating inside her flight gloves. One wrong move, one flicker of her stealth field, and she would die before she knew it. The command ship's hull filled her entire viewport now. She was close enough to see individual weapon emplacements, close enough to count the windows glowing with alien light. She activated the docking procedure, not to dock, but to match the ship's movement so she could attach the disruptor. "Deploying device," she announced. A small hatch opened on the Storm Hawk's belly. The quantum disruptor, a box no larger than a suitcase, extended on a mechanical arm and attached to the command ship's hull with magnetic clamps. Green lights confirmed the connection. "Device attached, activating in 3, 2, 1. The disruptor pulsed. For a moment nothing seemed to happen, then heard it, or rather, she heard the absence of it. The constant hum of coordination, the synchronized movements of their fleet, suddenly broke into chaos. Ships that had been moving in perfect formation began to drift. Fire that had been precisely targeted became wild and scattered. "It's working," shouted through the comm. "All units, the network is down, attack now." Across the battlefield, human ships pressed their advantage. Without coordination, they could not focus their defenses. A human cruiser broke through their formation and destroyed 2 enemy vessels in quick succession. Fighter squadrons swarmed around larger ships, overwhelming their individual defenses. But had no time to celebrate. The moment she activated the disruptor, she became visible. Alarms screamed as weapons locked onto her position. "Storm Hawk, get out of there," ordered. She pulled hard on the controls, spinning the Storm Hawk away from the command ship. Plasma fire filled the space she had occupied a second before. She dodged left, then right, then dove under a fighter that was trying to ram her. Her instincts took over, years of training and combat experience guiding her hands faster than thought. A shot grazed her wing, warning lights flashed, her ship began to spin. "I'm hit," she reported, fighting to regain control. "Engine 2 is gone, I'm losing power." "Can you make it back to the fleet?" Looked at her displays. The human fleet was too far away. Between her and safety were dozens of ships, all of them now aware of her presence. The odds of survival had just dropped from 12% to something much smaller. "Negative, I'm going to try something else." Before could respond, she turned her damaged ship toward the nearest fighter. The enemy pilot saw her coming too late. She crashed into him at full speed, her plasma torpedo detonating on impact. Both ships vanished in a ball of fire. On Horizon's edge, watched the explosion with a cold feeling in his chest. The display showed no signal from the Storm Hawk. "Lieutenant," he whispered. But there was no time to mourn. The battle was still raging. On Earth, the ground war had begun. Landing craft had descended on major cities, deploying troops with advanced weapons and armor. General commanded the defense of Seoul from a mobile command post, watching his soldiers fight enemies they could barely hurt. "Fall back to position 3, he ordered. "Let them take the outer districts, funnel them into the kill zone." Sergeant O led his squad through the burning streets, moving from cover to cover as alien soldiers advanced. They had planted explosives throughout the abandoned buildings, a trap that would spring when they walked into it. "Hold," whispered to his team. "Wait for my signal." The troops moved with confidence, their 4 eyes scanning for threats. They did not expect resistance. Every other species they had conquered had broken quickly, surrendering or fleeing. They did not understand that humans were different. The first wave of aliens entered the kill zone, raised his hand. Now, the buildings exploded. Fire and debris consumed 100 soldiers in an instant. The survivors stumbled, disoriented, their coordination lost without the network. "Attack!" shouted. His squad opened fire. Other squads emerged from hiding places, sewers, basements, rooftops. For the first time, they faced organized resistance on a planetary surface. For the first time, they felt fear. In orbit, Captain made a decision. The human fleet was pressing its advantage, but they were beginning to reorganize. Soon their backup systems would restore partial coordination. Soon the window would close. "This is Captain Park," he announced. "I'm taking Horizon's Edge into the enemy fleet. All personnel abandon station. Repeat, abandon station." Alarms wailed, escape pods launched, grabs arm. "What are you doing?" "Finishing what Lieutenant started." He met her eyes. "Get to a pod, Doctor. Someone has to survive to tell them what happened here." Hesitated, then nodded. She ran for the escape pods without looking back. Sat alone in the command center as Horizon's Edge accelerated toward the command ship. The enemy had restored partial function to their network, but not enough to stop a station traveling at full speed. He watched the distance shrink. 10,000 kilometers, 5,000, 1,000. The impact shattered both vessels. The network hub, already damaged by the disruptor, was destroyed completely. Across the battlefield, ships went dark as their coordination vanished forever. Admiral's voice cut through the chaos. "All units press the attack. Today we show them what humanity can do." The storm had awakened, and it would not stop until the enemy was broken. The 6th day rose over a changed world. In Seoul, smoke still rose from burning buildings, but the advance had stopped. General walked through the rubble of what had been a shopping district, stepping over broken glass and twisted metal. Around him, his soldiers were gathering captured alien weapons and treating wounded comrades. "General," a young officer called out, "we've pushed them back to the river. They're holding position but not advancing." "Good, hold the line. Don't pursue, we don't have the numbers for a counteroffensive yet." The truth was that humanity had won a battle, not a war. The destruction of the network hub had thrown their fleet into confusion, and Earth's forces had taken full advantage. 80 enemy ships had been destroyed or disabled in the orbital battle. On the ground, the invasion force had lost a quarter of its soldiers. For the first time in galactic history, a lesser species had fought the Dominion to a standstill. But they still had 300 ships in orbit. They still had thousands of soldiers on the surface, and they still had weapons that could burn cities to ash. In the remains of Horizon's Edge, rescue teams searched for survivors. Most of the station's crew had escaped in pods before the collision, but Captain Park had stayed at the controls until impact. No one expected to find him alive. Lieutenant was the one who found him. She had ejected from the Storm Hawk at the last second, her emergency beacon guiding a rescue shuttle to her location. When she heard about sacrifice, she insisted on joining the search teams. Now she floated through the wreckage in a rescue suit, scanning for life signs. "There," she said, pointing to a section of twisted metal, "I'm reading a faint signal." They cut through the debris with plasma torches. Behind a collapsed bulkhead, they found the remains of the command center. And in the center of the wreckage, trapped under a fallen beam but still breathing, was Park. "He's alive," breathed. "Get the medical team." His eyes flickered open. He looked up at with confusion, then recognition. "Lieutenant, you're supposed to be dead." "So are you, Captain. I guess we're both too stubborn." They pulled him from the wreckage and rushed him to a medical ship. He had broken bones, internal bleeding, and radiation exposure from the collision. The doctors said it was a miracle he had survived, said it was stubbornness. While recovered, the war continued. Admiral coordinated the defense from the unbroken will, but he knew they were running out of time. They were reorganizing. Without their network, they were slower and less coordinated, but they were still far more powerful than humanity's battered fleet. And then came the message. It arrived on a secure channel that no human had ever used, a frequency reserved for communication between Dominion species. Ambassador No, who had been sending desperate pleas for help to every alien race she could contact, was the first to receive it. "This is the free voice of the message said. "We have heard your call, we have watched your fight. For 10,000 years we have lived under Dominion rule, too afraid to resist. But you have shown us that resistance is possible. We offer you intelligence on deployments and weaknesses. We offer you hope. The storm you have become is spreading." Played the message for Admiral, tears streaming down her face. "It's not just she said. "I've received similar messages from 2 other species, the and the. They're all watching us. They're all ready to help." The Admiral listened in silence. When the messages ended, he turned to face the viewport, looking out at the battlefield where human and alien debris drifted together. "For 10,000 years, he said slowly, the Dominion has ruled through fear. They convinced every species that resistance was impossible, that fighting back meant death, that submission was the only choice." He turned back to, "We've just proven them wrong, and now everyone knows it." On the flagship, High Commander was learning the same lesson. Had commanded Dominion fleets for 300 years. He had conquered 40 worlds. He had destroyed species that dared to resist. But he had never seen anything like what humanity had done. They had fought when they should have surrendered. They had attacked when they should have defended. They had sacrificed their own lives to destroy his network, to wound his fleet, to survive. They were not supposed to survive. "High Commander," his adjutant said, "our ground forces report significant losses. The humans are using guerrilla tactics, attacking and withdrawing, using the terrain to their advantage. Our soldiers were not trained for this kind of warfare." "Then retrain them," snapped. "Or replace them, we have more troops on the—" "High Commander, there is another concern." The adjutant hesitated. "We are receiving reports of unrest among the subject species. They have stopped transmitting loyalty affirmations. They have withdrawn their diplomats from Dominion stations. There are rumors of secret communications between these species and Earth." Felt something cold settle in his stomach. Not fear. He did not permit himself to feel fear, but concern. The humans had done more than fight back. They had become a symbol, a proof that the Dominion could be hurt. If other species began to believe that resistance was possible, the entire structure of the Dominion could collapse. "Prepare the ordered." The adjutant went pale. "High Commander, that has not been used in 2,000 years. The Council forbids its deployment except in cases of existential threat," finished. "The humans have become an existential threat. Not because they can defeat us in battle, but because they can inspire others to try. We must destroy them completely. Not just their fleet, not just their military, their world, their species, their memory. Nothing of them must survive." There was a weapon from the early days of the Dominion, a planet killer, capable of cracking a world's crust and boiling its oceans. It had been used twice before, against species that had almost challenged Dominion rule. After its use, those species had been erased from history, their worlds left as burned and lifeless warnings. Now it would be used against Earth. On the medical ship, received the news from Admiral via video transmission. His injuries had been stabilized, but he was still too weak to return to command. He listened in silence as the Admiral explained the situation. "Our allies have intercepted Dominion communications," said. "They will arrive in 20 hours. When it does, they will destroy Earth. We cannot stop it with conventional weapons. It's too heavily shielded." "Then what do we do?" asked. "Doctor has a plan. That requires a significant charging time before it can fire. If we can get a team inside during that window, we might be able to redirect its targeting systems, turn the weapon against the fleet instead of Earth." "A team inside a planet-killing weapon surrounded by enemy ships," said flatly. "What are the odds?" "Worse than anything we've tried so far." Laughed, a painful sound that made his broken ribs protest. "Then it sounds like a job for humanity." In Seoul, Sergeant O received his new orders. He was to lead his squad on a mission that had less than 5% chance of success. They would board the, fight through its defenders, and manually reprogram its targeting systems. They would probably die. Gathered his team and explained the mission. When he finished, he expected questions, objections, fear. Instead, his soldiers just nodded. "When do we leave?" asked Private, the youngest member of the squad. 12 hours. Smiled a fierce, defiant expression. "Then let's make sure we hurt them before we go." Across the solar system, humanity prepared for its final gamble. Ships were repaired, weapons were loaded, and soldiers said goodbye to their families. In the bunker beneath Seoul, visited her mother one last time, holding her hand without speaking. In the command center of the Unbroken Will, Admiral recorded a message for his. And in the darkness between worlds, the approached, a weapon designed to end civilizations, to silence defiance forever. The thought they were about to destroy humanity. They did not understand that humanity was about to become something they had never faced before, not a cornered animal, not a defeated enemy. A storm that would tear their empire apart. The seventh day. The hung in space like a metal god, kilometers long, bristling with weapons, surrounded by a protective fleet of 50 warships. Its central weapon, a massive energy cannon that ran the entire length of the ship, was slowly charging. In 3 hours it would fire. In 3 hours Earth would burn. Admiral stood on the bridge of the Unbroken Will, watching the final preparations. Around him, officers coordinated the attack. Doctor monitored the quantum disruption systems, ready to interfere with any coordination attempts. Commander Shin, the ship's second-in-command, oversaw tactical operations with calm efficiency. "All units report ready," announced. "We have 47 ships capable of combat, 3,000 fighters, 1 chance." "Then let's not waste it," Admiral replied. He opened a channel to the entire fleet. "This is Admiral. In a few hours they will try to destroy our world. They believe this will end our species and crush the hope we have ignited across the galaxy. They are wrong." He paused, letting his words settle. Across the fleet, soldiers and pilots listened. "We have already done what no one thought possible. We have fought the Dominion and survived. We have broken their unbreakable network. We have shown every oppressed species in this galaxy that the masters can bleed. Now we will do something more. We will turn their own weapon against them. We will save our world. And we will teach them to fear the storm." The fleet moved forward. The battle began with a wave of fighters sweeping toward the escorts. Ships responded with overwhelming firepower, destroying dozens of human craft in the opening seconds. But the fighters were a distraction, a sacrifice to draw attention away from the real threat. A single shuttle, its hull modified with stolen stealth technology, slipped through the chaos undetected. Inside, Sergeant O and his squad prepared for the most dangerous mission of their lives. "Approaching this hull," the pilot announced, "docking in 30 seconds." Checked his weapon one final time. His squad, 5 soldiers who had volunteered knowing they would probably die, did the same. Private caught his eye and nodded. She was ready. The shuttle attached to an auxiliary airlock on the surface. Moved first, cutting through the seal with a plasma torch and dropping into the alien corridor beyond. The air smelled strange, metallic and cold, and the walls were covered in symbols he could not read. But the layout matched the intelligence provided by their allies. "Move fast," ordered. "We have less than 2 hours before that weapon fires." They encountered their first resistance at the third junction, 4 soldiers guarding a checkpoint. Squad opened fire without hesitation. The aliens had superior weapons and armor, but they were not expecting intruders. In 10 seconds, all 4 were dead. "Take point," said. "Everyone else follow close." They pushed deeper into the ship, fighting through corridors and chambers designed for creatures larger than humans. Each encounter cost them. Corporal Lee Minu took a plasma burn to his arm, and Private Han was grazed by shrapnel, but they kept moving. The clock was ticking. Outside, the battle raged. Admiral's fleet was taking heavy losses, but they were also inflicting damage. The escort ships were scattered, unable to protect both thee and themselves. One by one, Earth's cruisers targeted the enemy vessels, wearing them down with relentless attacks. On the bridge of her fighter, Lieutenant flew like a woman possessed. She had survived the Storm Hawk's destruction by ejecting at the last possible second, and now she was back in a standard fighter with standard weapons. But there was nothing standard about her skills. "3 more down," she reported, spinning away from an exploding ship. "Concentrate fire on their eastern flank, their weakest there." "Watch your 6, Commander warned. Rolled her fighter just as an interceptor opened fire from behind. The shots missed by meters. She completed the roll and fired her own weapons, destroying the attacker in a ball of fire. "Thanks for the warning," she said. "Now let's clear a path for team." Inside, the squad had reached the central control chamber. The room was massive, filled with alien machinery and dominated by a console at its center, the targeting system for the planet-killing weapon. 24 soldiers stood between them and their objective. "We go straight through," said. "No cover, no hesitation, make every shot count." They charged. The firefight was brutal and short. Plasma bolts filled the air. Sergeant Park fell first, hit by 3 shots to the chest. Corporal Lee Minu was next, cut down as he covered advance. The others kept fighting, knowing that stopping meant death for everyone they loved. Reached the console with only Still beside him. The rest of his squad lay scattered across the chamber floor, their sacrifice buying him these precious seconds. "I don't know how to operate this," admitted, staring at the alien symbols. "Neither do I, but sent us instructions." Pulled out a data device and connected it to the console. The device began transmitting override codes, patterns derived from months of studying captured technology. The console flickered, new symbols appeared, and then, slowly, the targeting display changed. Instead of pointing at Earth, this weapon was now aimed at the fleet. "It's working," breathed. But they were not alone. More soldiers were pouring into the chamber, their weapons raised, and had seconds to live. "Get to the shuttle," ordered. "Tell them we succeeded." "What about you?" Smiled, a tired, peaceful expression. "Someone has to make sure they don't change it back." He pushed toward the exit, then turned to face the advancing soldiers. His rifle was nearly empty. His body was exhausted, but his spirit was unbroken. "Tell them we didn't go quietly," he said. Then he opened fire. Ran. Behind her she heard fighting, heard his weapon empty and his voice shouting defiance until it was suddenly cut off. But she did not stop. She reached the shuttle, threw herself inside and screamed at the pilot to go. Outside, this weapon reached full charge. For a moment nothing happened. Then a beam of pure destruction erupted from its cannon, not toward Earth, but toward the heart of the fleet. The explosion was visible from the planet's surface. 80% of the remaining ships vanished in an instant, consumed by the weapon they had brought to destroy humanity. The itself, damaged by the redirected energy, began to break apart. High Commander watched from his flagship as his fleet died around him. For the first time in 300 years, he felt fear. "All ships retreat," he ordered. "Fall back to the transit point." The surviving vessels fled, leaving Earth behind. They left behind their dead, their weapons, their pride. They left behind everything except the memory of what they had witnessed. On the Unbroken Will, Admiral watched them go. He was wounded. A piece of debris had torn through his side during the battle, but he refused to leave the bridge until it was over. "They're running," reported. "The enemy is retreating." "Let them go," the Admiral replied. "We've made our point." On Earth, people emerged from bunkers and shelters, looking up at a sky no longer filled with enemy ships. In Seoul, General walked through streets where corpses lay beside human ones, the cost of victory made visible. In hospitals and medical ships, survivors were treated alongside the dying, their sacrifice honored even as their wounds were tended. Captain Park, still recovering from his injuries, received word of the battle's outcome on his hospital bed. When they told him about sacrifice, he closed his eyes and was silent for a long moment. "Make sure his name is remembered," he finally said. "Make sure they all are." 3 days later, now acting admiral after his retirement due to his wounds, made a broadcast that was heard across the galaxy. He stood on the bridge of a rebuilt command ship, his arm still in a sling, his face still marked by burns. Behind him, through the viewport, Earth turned slowly, a blue and green world but alive. "To the Dominion and to all who watch, you came to destroy us. You brought your greatest weapons and your mightiest fleets. You thought we would kneel as others have knelt. You were wrong." He paused, letting his words carry across light years to every listening ear. "We are not the species we were a week ago. We have been tested and we have endured. We have paid a price in blood that we will never forget, but we have also proven something to ourselves and to everyone else. The mighty can fall. The chains can be broken. The storm cannot be stopped." Across the galaxy, oppressed species heard his words. They declared their independence from the Dominion. They rose against their overseers. They sent ships to join Earth's fleet. The rebellion that humanity had ignited was spreading like fire. Ambassador No stood in the assembly hall of what would become the Free Worlds Alliance, watching representatives from a dozen species pledge their support. They had been strangers, scattered and afraid. Now they were united by hope. And in the skies above Earth, Lieutenant flew her fighter in formation with survivors of her squadron. They had lost so many, but they had also won something that could never be taken away. Freedom, hope, a future. She looked down at her and smiled. "We were cornered," she whispered to herself, to her fallen comrades, to the universe itself. So we became the storm. The storm that had started on Earth was now spreading across the stars. The Dominion was weakening, the Alliance was growing, and humanity, stubborn, defiant, unkillable humanity, was leading the way. The siege was over. The revolution had just begun.